Welcome back to the Game Lore Archives. Today we will be discussing the events of the recent Morrowind expansion for the Elder Scrolls Online, I think going up to the Clockwork City.
Yeah.
So, there's a darkness spreading over Vardenfell, and the Vestige finds himself helping Vivec uncover what's going on. This happens hundreds of years before the events of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, so don't expect everything to be the same. For example, a lot of Vivec City is still being built, but there is definitely enough here to provide a nostalgic hit. Before we go any further, we just want everyone to hit the subscribe button. It's cool, we'll wait. Done? Go, let's continue.
The Vestige arrives in Seyda-Neen, if travelling from mainland Tamriel, and is met by a resident called Alvessa. She tells the Vestige of a boy in Armiger, a member of the Tribunal's military order who hoped to emulate Vivec's teachings in word and action, who's been injured further down the road.
Because residents of Morrowind feel a member of the public who just got off a boat is definitely the right person to ask for assistance.
The Armiger will be attended by his escort, Canon Valassa. She then says that she was sent there by Vivec to ask some questions. However, the tomb they were travelling to was overrun with Daedra, and the Armiger was injured as they fled. She also tells the Vestige there was a third member of their group who would stay behind in hopes of finishing the mission and asking Vivec's questions to the Ancestor Ghost. Immediately after finishing the conversation, one of the bystanders is possessed by none other than Azura. She then says there's an evil in the land, and she foresaw the arrival of the Outlander to solve the problem. The others describe the risk Azura took to tell the Vestige this small bit of information, as they know how dangerous Vivec's wrath could be.
The Vestige heads east towards the tomb, where Canon Livel can be found waiting. After entering the tomb and fighting through the Daedra, the Vestige can ask questions Vivec wants to know. The spirit briefly talks about some interesting things. First of all, Vivec is concerned with the heart of the world. The spirit says it is safe, but is not sure why Vivec would be bothered about it. So, for anyone who has watched our episode on the creation of Nirn, you can have a good guess.
Also, clever clogs who know the lore and have probably figured it out, you are just showing off.
This is reference to Lorcan's heart, and it's said it was his body that made Nirn, and his heart resides in Tamriel. Vivec also wants to know if it's an enemy of old that has returned. The spirit says it is, but not the one Vivec is thinking of. Vivec has fought off many enemies in the past, and any one of them could be the one he's thinking of. But it's probably a good guess it's Dagoth, and the reason for this is the Dwemer had created the legendary tools needed to create Numidium,
which was a huge brass golem with the power to bring havoc and destruction to all of Tamriel.
And when the Battle of Red Mountain had finished, it fell to Tamriel to decide what to do with these tools. They decided to lock the tools away, but Dagoth would not give the tools up, and in this fight, it was believed that he was killed. I believe Vivec is worried about his return, and it's a valid worry. The third question is pretty straightforward. Vivec wants to know if Sothisil knew their power would fade. The spirit replies that Sothisil has seen many possibilities, and in some of them their power will eventually fade.
After leaving the tomb, the canon says he needs to report back to Vivec, and he requests the Vestige help as he did not understand the questions or the answers. Of course, the Vestige decides to go with him because, the protagonists, you get dragged along for all this kind of stuff. And as you approach Vivec City, you can see the scaffolding of the city still being built. After discussing what happened in the tomb, Vivec will ask for help. The first mission is to talk to the Archcanon, who distrusts the Vestige as an outlander and wants you to perform a divination ritual to see if any answers can be found as to what's making the land ill. The Archcanon sends the Vestige to get a blessing stone from one of the city's construction sites to help with the ritual, as it contains some of Vivec's power. The ritual shows images, but none are clear and of much help to Vivec. He then spills the beans that he's losing his own power, and he's not sure if it's from illness or of malice. He sends the Vestige to investigate.
The first port of call is to talk to the Archcanon and see if he was able to learn anything from the ritual. He's able to figure out the ritual showed Balamora, Aldahern, and Barazil Tower.
Near enough.
Baralzar's Tower.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
The Vestige can go to the locations in any order, but we'll start with Balazar's Tower, as it's the first one on the quest guide. Balazar is a powerful Dunmer mage who worked alongside Sothersil in his experiments of the Tribunal's divine power. Currently, he's working on the correlation between time and colour. After helping him with his experiment, he's willing to talk about the experiments with Sothersil. While Barrelzar was Sothersil's student, he was unable to figure out if the divine power was temporary or permanent. However, they did devise a device that could draw on the divine power of an individual and then return it once it was finished with. He also hands over his notes on the subject, but the vestige can't make any sense of them.
Next to do is to travel to Balmorra. It's best to go via Siltstrider because they're really cool and it's the quickest and easiest way to get there. Regardless of whether you rode or walked to Balmorra, you can begin the next stage of your investigation. House Redoran have closed the Shulk ore mine. You also overhear a Khajiit miner organising passage out of Balmorra, saying the cultists are insane. The vestige presses him for more information, but the Khajiit is scared to tell you anything else. The last idea is to try a local inn, as these places are often good for knowledge. The Randy Netch Inn has a barmaid who overhears all sorts of information.
I wonder if the name on the inn is well deserved.
With a little bit of gold, she opens up.
No, I bet she does.
And tells you that the cultists have caused the mine to be closed. Unlike something else. It seems pretty clear where you need to go.
Yeah, and it's not outside the inn.
Outside the mine, you meet the crew chief, and he tells you the cultists are after a weapon that will give them the power of a god. He also mentions that an Ashlander interrupted the ritual. The vestige goes in to investigate, and after defeating the remaining cultists, you find a note asking the Red Exiles to steal the staff the cultists were using, and also a bag of ritual components.
So with those components, the vestige then decides to go to the Aldnaran, which is an Ashlander settlement. There is an Ashlander named Seren, is demanding to see a brother, and the Red Exiles will not let her. The Ashlander are Dunmer, who did not join the houses and continue their nomadic lifestyle. They meet at religious sites to do trade, confer, and pay homage to the past. Alderaan is such a site, and normally Ashlanders are free to walk around. Seren asks you to help find her brother, and she suggests that doing so might further the vestige's own investigations. After rummaging through the Red Exile camp, you find notes on a meeting between Chidala, Seren's brother, and the Red Exiles, and he calls himself the Nevarine. He believes he is the reincarnation of the Nevarra, who brought stability to Morrowind and was killed after he defeated Dwemer.
Well, we say defeated, but if you saw the Dwemer episode, you know it's not quite as straightforward as that.
The person who was destined to cleanse the corruption of the Tribunal as promised by Azura, who was betrayed when the Tribunal got their divine powers. This is something the vestige feels might be worth mentioning to Vivec, and with all three avenues investigated and looked into, it's time to turn in. But the Archcanon contacts you first to inform you of Vivec's failing health. Returning to Vivec, you discuss the findings, and he agreed that Chidala's newfound power is worrying, and also feels you should investigate further.
The Archcanon sends a vestige back to Alderaan to see if Seren can help retrieve the staff that Chidala wields, as he thinks this may be one of Sothersil's tools, and that this is drawing on Vivec's power. Seren is waiting and is eager to help you disprove her brother's claims.
That's sisters for you.
Seren informs the vestige that her brother has organised a meeting with the wise woman to verify his claim to being the Nevarine. So she takes the vestige to see her, but Chidala has already spoken to her, and she's gone to meditate on his claim. Seren sends the vestige after the wise woman while she stays behind to keep an eye on the situation. Devrosi, the wise woman, is meditating in the cavern of the Incarnate. She asks you to speak to the spirits of the past failed Nevarras and use their flaws to compare Chidala to prove he's not the Nevarine. The first spirit says that he was the most powerful, but his power alone could not save his people, nor even himself. The second says that they followed a path of war, as they were greatly revered, but this led nowhere, and they fell from their lofty position. The third fell victim to his own pride, as he did not heed sound counsel and doomed his own tribe. Before the vestige leaves, Azura talks to them. She says that the vestige is on the right track, and that Chidala's staff is indeed a tool of Sothersil, but it was never meant to be used with evil intent. She then sends you to disprove Chidala's claim. Seren uses the scrolls the Vestige found in order to break his arguments and demonstrate his claim is false. Davrosi, the wise woman, agrees and declares his claim to be false. Chidala flees and some Red Exiles attack. When they're defeated, Seren is possessed by Azura, which is clearly a habit of hers, and informs you that there's something else at work here, but she can't quite figure it out yet. She says as much as she hates Vivec, his illness is caused by something much worse, and she would rather Vivec prevailed instead of whatever evil was behind this. The Vestige reports back to Vivec, who grows weaker still.
The Archcanon grows nervous, and he sends you back to Baralzar, who knows more about Sothosil's tools than anyone. When you get to him, he's trapped by some Daedra called Scaffin. After defeating them, Baralzil admits that he had no idea why they attacked, but says the work that he does often draws unwanted attention. He then suggests using a tonal inverter to reverse the effects of the staff so that Chidala can be stopped. He sends the Vestige to go and retrieve the parts from some hirelings, as he calls them. There are 3 of them, and after talking to each, the Vestige learns that they no longer work for Baralzil due to a suicide mission he would send them on.
As it becomes clear that Baralzar's basically borderline crazy.
They were more than happy to send the Vestige off. Once all the parts are gathered, the Vestige takes them back to Baralzil, who builds the inverter and informs the Vestige it is a 2-person machine, so they need to take someone they trust. The Vestige meets Saren and the Archcanon, who is angry at an Ashlander being in the city of Vivec. Saren says she's tracked her brother to a Daedric ruin called Kashtiara, who was dedicated to Malakath. As the Vestige enters the ruins, one of the Red Exiles seems to have survived a slaughter and tells you Chidala reached out to Malakath but was rebuked, as he is in service of another and all his men were killed. You head further into the ruins to confront Chidala, who summons 3 Scaffin. Seren tells the Vestige that these are minions of the Prince of Bargains. Eventually, Chidala is defeated and his sister mourns for him.
The Vestige takes the staff back to Vivec to try and save him. The Archcanon begins the ritual to restore Vivec's power, when Seren bursts in and stops it with the inverter. The Archcanon reveals that he's actually Barbas, faithful servant to Clavicus Vile. His plan was to reveal the location of the Clockwork City for his master, but he needed some of the Tribunal's power to do this. The ritual reveals the location, and Barbas escapes with the staff. Due to the damage Vivec sustained, he can only appear in spiritual form, no longer able to stay in his body. After talking to him, the Vestige hears screams from outside the temple. Due to Vivec's weakened state, the Red Mountain rumbles and the moonlit, a huge chunk of rock held up only by Vivec's power called Bar Hadao, begins to move towards the city, and chunks of rock fall from the sky, devastating the area. One of Vivec's cannons has the bright idea to use the divine power in a blessing stone to restore Vivec somewhat and prevent the inevitable calamity. So the Vestige dutifully goes out and retrieves one for him. It heals Vivec, but the canon does say that it's only a temporary measure and he does need to be fixed permanently.
So, although Vivec has some of his energies restored, he still can't take physical form. He asks the Vestige to talk to Seren and ask for Azura's help. The Vestige finds Seren and she is possessed by Azura, who says she knew he was going to ask for help, but still struggles to believe it. She explains the Clockwork City is hidden even to her, and summons Baralzar, who does know where it is. Baralzar realises that Barbarous is after the pool of Vivec's power in the city, and Baralzar will take you there so that he can be stopped. He opens a portal to Set's vault, where the city is kept. Baralzar explains that anyone entering the city needs to be shrunk down. As the Vestige chases Barbarous through the city, Baralzar thinks he's going to use Vivec's pool of stored power to create a portal for Calcius Vile so he can enter the Clockwork City. Barbarous is finally cornered in Sothosil's workshop, where he is ready to face the Vestige in some shiny new armour with a dog helmet more befitting for him. After defeating him, Calcius Vile revives Barbarous as a dog and opens a portal to Oblivion for him to flee through. The Vestige draw Vivec's power stored in the city into the staff and follows Baralzar through the portal he opened for Vivec City. However, Calcius Vile takes the Vestige to one of his Daedric shrines with the intention of trapping you there until you are no longer a problem. Baralzar comes to the rescue. He instructs the Vestige to distract the Daedric prince with some power of the staff. Barrowzar whisks them away, and the vestige appears back in the city of Vivec. Vivec urges the vestige to restore his power, as the power from the Blessing Stone used earlier is fading, as is his own life. The staff is stored at the end of his bed, and the power flows back into him. His body joins his spirit, and he is restored. Vivec then holds out rewards to those who helped him.
Incidentally, what he gives Barrowzar for helping is some coloured stones, which contain some of his power in.
Okay.
Because, that's what he really wanted.
Gotta love some colour.
Yeah.
But how long was Barbarous... Oh, he was in the Archcanon, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he took the place of the Archcanon for apparently quite some time.
Okay.
And so that's the main quest line for the Morrowind DLC. Like we said earlier, the story does carry on in the Clockwork City, but at time of writing it wasn't out just yet. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon as well. Also, we're on a new service called Top Buzz, so download that and check it out as well. As is tradition, we also would like to ask you, how do you feel about the Tribunal? Do you think they're good or evil?
Well, thanks for watching.